You know, it's something else growing carnivorous plants under lights in your own living space. Around about 3 months ago, at the start of winter, I decided to experiment by bringing indoors these carnivorous plants. I brought in some week-old seedlings, I brought in some mature plants, and I even propagated some seedlings all under these very same lights. In this video, I'm going to go through how the plants and seedlings have responded, how I've looked after them, and of course the equipment that I've used to grow my carnivorous plants. My name is Jerry from Succulent Fly Traps. So these are the lights that I'm using. These are Sansi 40 watt adjustable 4-head clip-on LED grow lights with timers. The full details of these lights are in the video description. I have 2 grow lamps. That's the clamp of one of them. And this is the clamp of the other. You can see there it says max 4 lots of 10 watts. That's because each grow lamp has 4 heads or 4 lights. Each of these lights consumes 10 watts of power. When they're all on, the maximum they consume is 40 watts of power. It's important when you're replacing these bulbs that you replace it with a bulb that has a 10 watt rating as well. You don't want to be putting in a bulb that's rated more than 10 watts into these sockets. It's pretty easy to focus that light onto your plant simply by moving these flexible arms. Each of these sockets are labelled A, B, C and D. That's because each of these grow lamps has this control panel. Press A, that turns that corresponding light on or off. Press that light there in the top left, that turns on either the 4, 8 or 12 hour option. Press it again and that turns off. I'm not actually using this timer because my plants require more than the 12-hour photo period option here. I'm actually using another timer, which we'll have a look at in a minute. Now this model of grow lamps is the European model. The reason is because they use a similar voltage to what we do here in Australia. It's important, guys, that when you're ordering these online, that you order the right one that's going to be working in the country where you're going to be using these lights. I like the basic setup of this. I'm not using a grow lamp here. It's basically out in the open. Wherever you can attach those clamps, you can pretty much grow plants. Here I'm using wooden slats because I'm using this old greenhouse here. They're very flimsy, so by using those slats, I was able to use these clamps. Alright, so we're going to start off here with this beautiful pot of Drosera spatulata. These are classified as Tropical Sundews. Sundews are, of course, those plants that have got those sticky leaves. You can see here how sticky it is. That's how they attract, capture and eventually digest prey items. So these specimens here are called Drosera spatulata. That's because those leaves look like spatulas. So these plants here were potted up into this one pot at the start of winter, and they've been under these lights ever since. They're looking pretty good, pretty happy. You can see these flower stalks coming up. That's always a good sign because the plants make the most of the good growing conditions by producing and releasing heaps of seeds. I'm going to be harvesting these seeds pretty soon as well. Now in contrast, here's the photo of another plant, the same species of plant, Drosera spatulata. You can see how it's been well and truly affected by those cool growing conditions outside. So this is another species of sundew. This is another tropical sundew. It's called Drosera bermani, otherwise known as the tropical sundew. You can see how there's so much mucilage on these leaves. It's very, very sticky indeed. And the reason is because these plants over here started off as seedlings. So this is how the seedlings looked like. This was around late autumn or late fall. The seeds were sown in these peat pots. They're sitting in a food container with holes in it to draw in water. This is in my outdoor nursery. To protect the seedlings, I placed a food container on top, clear of course to allow in light. I also placed in some bamboo stakes to elevate the lid and allow airflow in at the same time. Because they're a lot lower in the container, this container over here, and they're closer to the water source, there's a lot more humidity, hence why there's a lot more dew around those leaves. In contrast, these ones over here, the Drosera spatulata, there's dew there, but not as much. That comes down to less humidity. These ones are actually more outside the container here with the water in it. So let's just get back to these Drosera bermani. Like the Drosera spatulata, they are tropical. They don't like conditions below 10 degrees Celsius for any lengths of time, otherwise they will start to die off. You can see all these beautiful flower stalks over here. Typical of sundews, they make the most of the conditions by producing plenty of seeds. These plants down here, they're around about, say, 5 centimeters across. Very nice, healthy specimens. So let's get to the seedlings I've got here. These are Cape sundews, Drosera capensis. This is the albino form. They don't have much coloration in the leaves, unlike these seedlings over here. That one there, it's quite red. There's another one over there. This is the parent plant that I got the seeds from in my outdoor nursery. I pretty much just sowed the seeds around about 8 weeks ago onto these peat pots, and they've just grown quite nicely. I used to have some plastic wrap over it to increase the humidity. I removed it around about 2 weeks ago just to give it a little more airflow. But I'm quite happy with the results. They germinated within about 2 weeks. Now, what's important, guys, when you're trying to germinate seeds is that you really wash that peat moss very thoroughly, okay guys? That's going to prevent any mold outbreaks. Mold can overtake seedlings before they've even sort of taken off. So the way I do it is just by rinsing the peat moss into some fly screen. Give that a good rinse, say about 3 or 4 times, and that will hopefully prevent any mold outbreaks. So here we have some more Drosera spatulata. These are really beautiful specimens. These are around about 4 centimeters across. These are the same species as these ones over here, just that this is a different form. You can see here how the leaves here are sort of more broader compared to the ones over here, which are narrower. And these ones here seem to be longer than the previous form of Drosera spatulata. I started off at the start of winter by bringing these indoors from my outdoor nursery. They were slightly smaller than this, and they've really grown quite nicely under these lights. Again, there's not that much dew or mucilage on those leaves. Being winter, there's not much humidity around, but not only that, these plants have been grown outside of the water container. They're just sitting in a tray, so they're more in the open, so you're not going to see that much mucilage on those leaves. However, there's enough mucilage on those leaves for food items to be placed on them and for the plant to benefit from that. And I'll get to how I've been feeding these later on. Moving along, this is the first time I've actually tried, well, it's the first time I've tried with all these plants, but this one here, this is a Cephalotus, otherwise known as the Albany Pitcher plant. Again, around the start of winter, I separated a pot plant and I placed the root cuttings in here. This is a 2-to-1 potting medium, 2 parts peat moss to 1 part perlite, and they seem to be going okay. They were quite small, they didn't really have any pitchers, and now these pitchers have formed, so I'm really happy with how they're looking. I can't wait to see how they look like in a couple of months' time. And like the Carnivorous spatulata earlier, this is just growing in a water saucer, water container, and I'll just fill that water up as required. So what about care requirements? The great thing is that because you're growing these plants under artificial lights, so long as the plants are happy, you can pretty well set and forget the light requirements for your plants. So long as the timer goes on and off at the appropriate time, you've got nothing to worry about. All you have to worry about are things like feeding and watering. Feeding we'll be covering later on. In this section, we'll be covering the watering care requirements. Now, I'm assuming here, guys, that you use soft water for your plants because they are sensitive to water that's got chemicals in it, like tap water. It's best to use soft water, which is distilled water, rainwater, or reverse osmosis filtered water. Let's have a closer look. So as you can see here, I've got some pots that are sitting in their own water tray. I've got these peat pots here, including this pot sitting in a larger tray or a larger container. It's pretty simple when it comes to watering. All you've got to do is just make sure that there's water in the container that they're sitting in. These peat pots are sitting in a food container that's got holes in it. That's how it's able to extract water and absorb it. These ones over here, just sitting in their own water tray. Again, just make sure that there's water in the tray. There's water in that one there. Now, when it comes to Cephalotus, guys, don't know whether you know this, but they're pretty sensitive to being overwatered. What I do when watering Cephalotus is just put enough water into the tray just to cover the surface like that, and that will be absorbed by the peat moss. And then once that dries out again, wait a couple of days and then continue the process. That way you're not overwatering that peat moss and you will prevent your plant from dying. It can sort of get a bit sensitive from what I've heard online and also my own experience. On the bottom here, I've got some wicking material, which I thought I was going to use, but I'm not actually using that. I'm just sitting that whole pot in the water tray and I water it as I've explained. So when it comes to feeding, it's very important that you feed them quite regularly. Due to the fact that they're being grown under artificial lights indoors, they don't have access to insects like they would outdoors. So it's important that you regularly feed them so they look their best. So simply get your bloodworm and then just gently place it on the leaf like that. Give it a gentle pat. That's pretty much all you've got to do. It's important when you're feeding your plants bloodworms like this, that you don't put too much on there, okay guys? What will happen eventually, that leaf will curl over those bloodworms to help digest it. If you have too much, it can expose those bloodworms and that can cause a mold outbreak. You don't want that. So just gently pat that down like that. I like to feed around about, say, 5 leaves per plant. That will give it a really good feed. I like to wait around about, say, 10 days. If it's a big prey item like this, those leaves will curl over it. Once they unfurl again, you know that it's ready for the next feeding session. Okay, guys? If it's sort of like smaller prey items like this, it may not curl over. But again, wait around about 10 days and continue feeding them again. That will give them a good feeding session. Okay, one over here as well. Give it a gentle pat. And that's pretty much all you have to do. Pretty simple. Okay, so just a moment again of gently placing that clump of bloodworms onto the leaf. Like that. That's all you've got to do. This is 5 minutes later. You can already see how those leaves have started curling over, those bloodworms. So with the seedlings, when you start to see leaves like that, you can pretty much just add a little bit of the bloodworm on to that leaf, like so. Again, you don't want to put too much on, just enough to get that leaf wrapped around that prey item or those bloodworms, and they should be fine. Try to use appropriate size of bloodworms for what you're feeding. These are quite small, these seedlings, so you need a smaller piece of bloodworm, but this should be a nice amount. Or if that's too slow, what you can do is just apply with a syringe some liquid fertilizer. It has to be very dilute. I'm using 4 drops to 250 milliliters of water. So it's 4 drops of power feed that I'm using, which is a seaweed based solution. So it just makes it a bit easier just to put those drops around the roots. You can also use this method around the Cephalotus if there aren't any open pitchers. If there's any open pitchers, there's one there, but it's a bit small, that one to feed, but these larger ones, when they open, I'll start giving them bloodworms. Just go around and apply the liquid fertilizer. I've already applied some of this, and I've noticed that these pitchers have formed very quickly. They're growing
quite rapidly, which I'm very happy about. So yeah, just another method of feeding your plants.
So hopefully now you have a better idea of how to grow carnivorous plants under artificial lights. Just goes to show that a simple basic setup like this can be very effective and also a lot of fun. As I said before, once those lights are set up and your plants have responded favorably, it's a matter of set and forget. All you've got to worry about is having that timer turning on roughly during sunrise and turning off after a certain amount of time. Now, my plants are getting 16 hours of artificial light per day, so that might be a guide for your plants as well. When it comes to watering, you know how to water the plants. Never allow that peat moss to dry out. Try not to overwater the Cephalotus. Now you know how to feed your plants. You've got an idea of two basic techniques that I showed you. You got the bloodworm and the toothpick method, or if you want to apply feeding to more plants, use the syringe method. As I said, I use a concentration of 4 drops of a concentrated seaweed solution to 250 mils of water, or you can mix up a concentration up to about 150 ppm or parts per million. Any more than that and you may burn the roots of your plant. So until next time everyone, happy growing.